Music artists and entrepreneurs, what's good? Mike Sarge here from MikeSarge.com, and today I'm going to answer an age-old question. Which one should I release next? Which one should music artists really want to release? Albums or EPs? Which one should you go with? I'm going to help you out with that today. Don't worry about it, but you don't want to miss this one. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and let's work. Salute to that. Now, as the music industry and music business continues to progress, this is a question that gets asked more and more by the day. Which one should you go with? Should you go with the album, the full-length album, or should you release more EPs? I'm going to help you guys out with this. Matter of fact, we're going to go through both. I'm going to explain the difference between both, and then I'm going to give you pros and cons of each. So if you're ready, go ahead, buckle up your seatbelt, and let's get it on.
Oh, the wind! And the drums! Too bad that didn't kill me.
Alright, so the first thing I want to do is talk about the differences. What is the difference between an album and an EP for those of you that may not know? To keep it simple, an album is a music project that consists of 8 or more songs. Now, for an EP, it stands for extended playlist, or for some of you, you can just say extended play. Basically, it's just a project or body of work that's too short to be an album, but it's more than one song, and therefore it's too long to obviously be a single. Also, if you hear someone use the phrase or use the term LP, they're referring to an album. That's used interchangeably. But there you go. That's just the difference between an album and an EP in a very simplified way. All right, now let's get into the pros and cons, and we're going to start with the EP first. One pro of going with the EP route is the fact that the project is short. The project is short, which means it takes less time to create. You know, most albums, they take about a year to create, to produce, mix and master, get everything in the correct place, track listing. But for an EP, you can do that in half the time. So one of the pros is the fact that it's short. EPs are also budget friendly. Look, if you're an artist, especially if you're just starting out and you feel like, man, I don't really have an album type budget, all right, no problem. EPs are perfect for that. Again, there are not as many songs on the project, so that means you're not spending as much money to get things done. You're not having to worry about as much of production costs and mixing costs and things like that. All right, so another pro that actually helps out your audience and the people that are going to be going out to get your music is that EPs are cheaper. They are cheaper. So if you go to Amazon, if you go to iTunes, wherever you get your music, and you look at the prices of albums compared to EPs are cheaper. The last pro that I'll give about EPs is that it gives you the freedom of creating. And what I mean the freedom of creating is when working on albums, it comes with a certain pressure. You know that people are paying attention to it. You know that people are really, there's huge anticipation, there's huge expectations on it. Whereas an EP is just like, oh snap, he or she's releasing music. All right, cool, bet. I guess I'll check it out. And so it gives you the freedom of creating. It doesn't feel like there are limits on you. You can just go, and if you just want to do a project on coffee and write and produce 5 songs about coffee and frappuccinos and things like that, you can do that. If you want to do a summer album that all the production has summer vibes, if you want to do an EDM inspired project, you can do that. If you want to do a project on nothing but cartoons, you can do that because EPs give you that freedom of creating. All right, now let's talk about the cons of going the route of an EP. All right, so one of the things I'll mention with an EP is that it gives you limited benefits. And what I mean by that, an EP is just a snapshot. Like, that's literally all it is. It's just a snapshot of the type of music that you're making in that moment. But EPs don't necessarily tell a story to the same extent as an album might. Matter of fact, hold up, let me break that down even further. When you think about your favorite artist, when fans think about their favorite artist, generally they're thinking about their albums. They're not thinking about their smaller projects. They're not thinking about their EPs. So what I'm telling you is, again, EPs are just snapshots, all right? You're not emotionally invested or connected as much in an EP compared to an album. One con that you may want to consider when it comes to an EP is the fact that, yeah, it's a short project, which means it gives you a short listen. All right, a lot of times you might feel like you might get through a project and go, dang, that's it? Like ever just been on a drive and you play an EP, play something from new music from an artist and it's an EP and you're playing it, you're on the road and you're just kind of lost in your thoughts and you're like, that's it? Like the music's done? Yeah, so just take that into account. It's not the worst thing in the world that it's short, and sometimes that can actually benefit you because it'll give them like that taste almost. You kind of hit them with an appetizer, but you don't really give them the full taste, and that can set you up to give them an album later. But just understand that sometimes if you're just hitting people with nonstop EPs, people feel like, all right, that's cool. They drop 4 songs here. All right, cool. They drop 5 songs here. All right, cool. But where's the meat? And the album represents the meat. So that might be a con as well of going the EP route. All right, now let's discuss the pros and cons of albums, starting with the pros. All right, one of the pros of going with the album, going with the route of an album, is the fact that it tells a story. It tells a story. Look, if you're a fan or you're looking to become a fan, connecting with someone's story is what keeps you there as a super fan, right? So you might listen to somebody new and you're like, oh snap, this music is pretty good. All right, that's what gets you there. Kind of whets your appetite, but what keeps you there is when you listen to the rest of the album and you hear their story, you hear the highs, you hear the lows, you hear their shortcomings, you hear the growth. That's what makes you a super fan is being able to connect with their story, and albums allow you to tell a story. Another pro of going the album route is the fact that albums help solidify your career. Now, what I mean by that is a lot of times artists don't even consider themselves established artists until they've released an album. And I know oftentimes that happens with me as well. Like a lot of times I listen to an artist and they'll send me a link to their stuff or I'll go check them out. But there are times where I subconsciously, not even realizing I'm doing it, I'm going, well, like, okay, yeah, they got a mixtape out. All right, cool. They got a EP out. They got a single out, but where's the album? And you don't realize you're doing it, but that is our way of in our head going, okay, they're established, they're for real, they're doing this for real. This band is for real, this singer's for real, this rapper's for real because they have an album. So it solidifies your seriousness as an independent artist. Now, another pro that obviously you care about is the fact that because it's an album and there are more songs, you're obviously going to make higher sales. Yeah, I mentioned earlier that albums are priced higher than EPs. And because of that, when people buy your album, you're obviously making more money than you would with an EP. All right, another pro would be the numbers game. The numbers game, and I'm going to explain this a little bit. Let's say you have 12 to 15 songs on your project, right? Well, that means you have a higher chance of people liking at least 2 to 3 of your songs, especially if you have 15 songs. Hopefully there are at least 3 songs that people like on it. But that also means, think about it from the performance, perspective, right? You don't have to worry about, being restricted or limited to only performing 3 or 4 songs that you would be limited on an EP. Because again, there's only 4 or 5 songs, maybe 6. You're limited to performing just those songs. But if you have an album with at least 12 to 15 songs, that means you can always switch it up during your performances and you can perform what you want to perform. So if you're in front of an audience that they've heard certain songs a couple times, then you can switch it up and throw in a wrench, throw in someone else's favorite song in there. And again, the numbers game is something that would definitely benefit you in the long run. And the last pro I'll give is that albums often are easier to market than EPs. What I mean by that is no one wants to hear, 6 to 7 months in advance that you have, a project that's only going to have 4 songs coming out, which is why a lot of EPs fall through the cracks when it comes to new releases. So again, it's just easier to market because you're like, hey, I can promote that I have this album, this 12-song album. Oh, but I'm going to give you guys 1 to 2 singles. You know why? Because I got 10 more songs left, so I'm not worried about doing singles. Well, with an EP, it's kind of harder to do a single when there are only a couple songs on it, and then people only feel like they're buying 4 more songs. All right, so let's talk about the cons for a minute for going the album route. All right, so the first con that comes to my mind is the fact that because it's a bigger project, it tends to take longer to make. Again, most albums, man, they take generally at least a year to make a full-length, a good full-length album. Now, the other side of that is because you have more songs to create and it's bigger, that also brings on more costs. Now, granted, there are ways around that, especially if you're producing it yourself, you're mixing and mastering it yourself, you can make your own album covers and things like that, but the average artist, they generally don't. So when I'm talking about costs, most of the time I'm talking about studio time. That's actually what I'm referring to for most independent artists. They're talking about studio time. So the more songs that you have to do, the more money you got to kick out, the more resources and things that you got to kick out for that album. Now, from your fan standpoint, another con is the fact that albums cost more than EPs to buy. So again, if there's two artists that I really enjoy, one releases an album and one releases an EP, well, if I'm kind of low on cash, I might have to go the EP route because it's cheaper. It's much cheaper. Well, I shouldn't say much cheaper, but it's cheaper than the album. And the last con that I would give is the fact that albums are high risk, high reward. And what I mean by that is, okay, you could have, in your mind, you could think, man, I got a great album. You've been working on it for the last year. You've been getting music videos together. You've been printing out t-shirts, CDs, all this great stuff. And then the project releases. And come to find out, it's not that great. And come to find out, people don't really like the music. And now you're stuck with a whole bunch of CDs in your house and a bunch of t-shirts in your house. And you're just stuck with it, and you have a project that's just sitting on iTunes and Spotify and Google Play and things like that that no one is really paying attention to. So that is a risk. It is a risk. Investing all that time and investing all that emotion in your story and all those things could come back to bite you if it's not marketed or promoted the right way. So just consider that. All right, so to give you a quick review, in short, albums require a bigger commitment, but they tend to give you bigger potential benefits, while EPs, you don't have to commit as much, but they're easier to release, and it gives you the ability to have more opportunities to try new things. Now, if I had to give you guys a recommendation, I would recommend newer artists that are trying to build their fan base, really build their brand, and to get in front of new people. I would recommend you guys go the EP route. It's also cheaper, more budget friendly. Also, if you're one of those people that you only release music like once every 2 years, I recommend you go the EP route as well, because then you could just put a few songs together, put it in a project, and just release it. Now, on the flip side, if you're someone that maybe you've done it for a while, or you're just ready to have yourself as an established artist, and you've invested in your music creatively, emotionally, financially, and you believe you have a great collection of songs that you want people to hear, then I recommend that you go the album route and don't look back. Stay consistent and do what you got to do. Again, in a nutshell, it really is on you. Just look at the pros, look at the cons, look at your current situation and figure out what's best for you. Do you feel like it's time for you to drop an album and consider yourself an established artist? Or do you feel like, you know what, I want to build my fan base a little bit. I want to start figuring out what really works, what type of songs people like from me, what kind of songs do people like, I'm not really into that. Start figuring out who your fan base is. The choice is yours, but at least you have options, and that's a great thing to have at the end of the day. So, what'd you think? Did you like this video? If so, go ahead and hit that like button, then hit that subscribe button so you get notified every time I drop a new video. Also, if there's a particular topic you would like me to talk about, go ahead and head down to the comment section. Leave your suggestion. I do read my comments, so I will add your suggestion to the list. And, as always, be you. Enjoy your life. Live authentic. Salutes to that. Catch y'all later.